Hey folks, our cemeteries are some of the most beautiful places that we have within the state of Utah, and they're a value that we have, and to many of us they're kind of sacred places where our loved ones lie. And so how do we make sure that we keep those beautiful places like that as well as safe if we're working there? That's what we want to talk about today. Safety at your cemetery starts right at the front gates. Let's look at the gates and make sure that they're secured so they can't swing and impact vehicles as they're going around, or people or equipment. Also, some places have cattle guards. Let's look at that and make sure that we have a walking path so people can safely walk in and out of there without having to try to traverse a cattle guard. Now, no cemetery would be complete without a flagpole, but they also can be hazardous. So let's take a look at our flagpoles and ensure that they're properly secured. But also, one thing that we may not think about happens down at the bottom of the flagpole. Here we have a light fixture that's designed to shine up onto that flag, and that makes it beautiful at night. It's the appropriate way to do it. However, it can cause injuries. Take a look at those light fixtures and ensure that if they produce significant heat, that they're guarded and kept away from where children or others could come in contact with those. Serious injuries have happened from lights just like that.
Irrigation systems can be deadly if they aren't managed correctly. Install slope grading over entrances to pipes where open canals are present. Install sprinkler heads and piping at grade to eliminate trip hazards. Where this isn't possible, clearly mark sprinklers with high visibility paint. Sidewalks and walkways with holes, cracks, or uplifts exceeding a 1/4 inch need to be ground, lifted, or replaced. Sprinkler control boxes should be in good condition and installed at grade to prevent trip hazards.
Take a look around your cemetery for holes or other depressions that could cause people to trip. As I was walking out in this area, here's a hole or a depression in the ground that is not really apparent because the mower goes right over it. Anyway, make sure those trip hazards aren't out there so our patrons can have a good, safe experience.
Newly dug graves can become trip hazards if they settle and create holes or depressions. Monitor new graves and backfill as necessary.
Cemetery sheds and maintenance shops and tool storage should be kept secured, as many of these are not occupied on a regular basis. So keep those doors locked and keep your equipment inside so it can stay safe. Sometimes we have some extra materials hanging around our cemetery that we're keeping around for use at a later time. Those can be hazards to people that are around or using our cemeteries. So let's try to keep those either away from the cemetery if we've got another laydown area, or put those behind a fence or someplace where we can securely store those to keep them from being a hazard or from being stolen. Do a regular electrical inspection around your cemetery grounds where you have lights or other electrical controls to ensure that they're in good condition and not open and exposed to children and others that might get into where they're not supposed to. So a lot of people think a cemetery is a place where you go and dig holes. While that might be the case, when we're doing any excavation outside of our known cemetery grounds where there could be utilities, let's ensure that we do our job and call 811 and locate those utilities prior to doing any digging. That's for your safety. While monuments in our cemetery can be beautiful, sometimes they can become hazards to the people that come to the cemetery and even for ourselves. So we need to monitor those monuments, especially the large ones that can become damaged, break down over time, or maybe start to tip one way or another. Around the country, there have been a number of cases where people have been killed as these large monuments have tipped over. So let's monitor those monuments and take quick action when we find that there's a problem. So what's appropriate for people to bring to our cemeteries? Is it appropriate for them to put up a flagpole, maybe some wind vanes like this, maybe things that make noise, maybe lights, maybe who knows what they might bring out there. Now, my personal goal for my monument when I'm gone is I want a big marble slippery slide. I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford that. So let's build a plan that will guide our patrons in what's appropriate and what isn't, and really make a concerted effort and thought to what might be brought in. Trees are one of the great resources that we have in our cemeteries, but they can also be risks to our organization and really to our patrons out there visiting our cemeteries. So how do we ensure that those trees are safe? Well, we need to make sure that they're monitored, and that if there's a problem with those trees, we take care of that in a timely manner. We've got to do our regular trimming. Even things like the roots on those trees can be risks to people as trip hazards. So let's keep an eye on those trees and keep them beautiful in our cemeteries. Speaking of trees, we also think about those branches. If branches are too low, they can be a hazard to people or to vehicles like this one behind me that's actually protruding right out into the road. We should cut those off at 7 feet high. So make sure that we're surveying those, and if they start getting too low, let's do our trimming. Good fences make good neighbors, and sometimes your neighbors are people and sometimes they're cows. Let's look to make our cemetery fencing, keep it in good condition, so we keep people safe and keep cows or people on their correct side of the fence. Just like good fences make good neighbors, good signs make good patrons. So take a look at what your rules are for your cemetery and make sure that we're communicating those to our patrons so they understand what's appropriate and what isn't, and that will avoid a lot of those misunderstandings that can cause problems. Take a minute to drive around your cemetery and look at our roads and the paths in the area. How well are they designed? If you look behind me here, you can see that this curve is a little too sharp and people are cutting the curve. What does that mean? On the other side of it, are they going to cut close to those monuments, or is there a chance that we could damage those? So let's see if we can make those curves a little bit wider, design those a little bit better so people can safely get through our cemeteries.
Staff should be trained to use care when operating around the public. Keep a close lookout when moving equipment and make sure all backup alarms are functional. Don't allow the public to be close to grave digging operations, and stop mowing and trimming when people are nearby. Formal rules and policies for funeral directors and others operating in your cemetery will avoid conflicts and will prevent accidents. Funeral directors should provide a certificate of insurance naming your organization as an additional insured on their general liability policy. Thanks for all of your efforts to build safe cemeteries. With a little forethought and effort, we can make our cemeteries safe for the general public to enjoy for generations. If you have questions about cemetery safety, please contact the Trust's Loss Prevention Team. We're here to help.